Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are here to talk about EB-5. Myself, Rima Rasool, I'm the Manager of Investor Relations for Zen EB-5. We have Bhuplesh Gupta, who is the VP of Operations. He is, for our project, the gentleman responsible for giving you your money back. So he's definitely someone that you want to know and talk to. And then we are very, very grateful to have our special guest, Jacqueline Trevino, EB-5 attorney based in the DFW. She's going to talk to us about what's happening right now, the timing of EB-5. And we are going to, I know that there are going to be a lot of questions, so please do put them in the chat. I'm going to try to get to them. And then if there are any questions that we can't get to, I will be absolutely answering them via email, or, we will get back to you. It's just if it kind of goes over. And so I'm again, thank you so much, Jacqueline, for being here. And I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about EB-5.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all for having me tonight. I have a little presentation, so I'm going to share my slides. And this is basically our team when it comes to attorneys for the EB-5 portion of our firm. Rakesh, he is our managing partner. He is the attorney of record for the EB-5 cases. He's not able to join us tonight, but you decide to move forward with our team, that's someone that you would also be able to meet and work with for the EB-5 filing. Yeah. So just a quick note, this presentation is for information purposes only. Nothing in this presentation is to be constituted as financial advice or the promotion of any project. So there are some details about Rakesh himself. Again, managing partner of the firm. PSBP Law recently had a name change to that. PSBP Law, we were formerly Patel Law Group. If you're in the Dallas area, you might recognize that name. Rakesh has won the top EB-5 investor magazine for EB-5 attorneys the past couple of years. He's been practicing immigration for 20, but been in the EB-5 space for 10 or 11 years now. I've been in the EB-5 space for about 2.5 years now, have been with the firm for the same amount of time, and he and I are the attorneys that you would essentially be working with for the EB-5 filing if you engage our firm. So here's an overview of some basic topics for the EB-5 program and some just hot topics that are trending for EB-5. So we'll go over potential retrogression strategies, and we'll discuss CSPA updates as well, how we can freeze a child's age and avoiding having them age out. We'll also talk about source of funds, of course, the requirements and timelines for I-526E approvals. And then there's 2 topics here related to source of funds that I think are just, popular hot topics right now that we'll also discuss related to source of funds. So retrogression strategies, what is it and when will it happen? So retrogression is essentially when visas have been put into backlog and a date has been issued on the visa bulletin. So today, if you take a look at the EB-5 set-aside categories on that visa bulletin, they're current. There is a letter C there that indicates there is no backlog. And essentially that means that investors in those categories can also submit a green card application. So the question is, when will retrogression occur? That's the question that we often get. And it's not something that we would have an answer to until it happens. There are lots of opinions and lots of data that, can help someone determine when that possibly might occur. But ultimately, the visa bulletins are issued on a month-to-month basis. Sometimes they indicate notes like they did in January of last year, I believe there was a note that there was, potential retrogression or backlogs going to be issued, and none had been afterwards. So those are things that we keep an eye out for. Notes on the visa bulletin itself, which is updated every month. Let's say there is retrogression after filing. What we would do is we would have to take a look at your priority date and compare it to the date that's been issued on the visa bulletin to determine whether your green card application at that point in time could move forward and be adjudicated. So this last point here is about partial investment strategies to preserve your dates. So right now, we're towards the end of January. The visa bulletin for February is already out. It was issued earlier this month. We will learn about the visa bulletin for March sometime in early February. So let's say, for example, there is retrogression in the month of March. There has been a backlog or a date issued for the EB-5 categories on the visa bulletin. What that means is that those who are filing during the month of March would not be able to benefit from a concurrent filing. The concurrent filing is essentially a handful of application forms that are submitted at one time. So that includes the 526E form, which we can always submit. We can always file that. That's tied to your source of funds. The other applications include the green card application, the I-485, the I-765, and the I-131. Those are for the employment authorization documents and the travel documents. So all of those forms together are the concurrent filing. If there were a backlog issued for the month of March, for example, the goal would be to come up with a strategy to either file by the end of February, where we know concurrent filing is available for investors, or, coming up with a plan to do a partial investment. There are a few things to consider there for the partial investment, which I can talk about a little bit more after just kind of some general information. So the program set-asides are the three categories that we're looking for on the visa bulletin. They are the rural, the high unemployment, and the infrastructure projects. They're the last three categories on the employment visa bulletin, and those are the categories that are current right now for EB-5. The benefits there are, again, the concurrent filing that I mentioned. You have the $800,000 investment requirement as opposed to the $1.05 million for the other unreserved categories. And then the processing times, particularly for that first visa category, those are seeing, faster processing times, and then also the categories being current as well. So for source of funds, all investments must be at risk. So that essentially means that your investment is subject to potential loss or gain. All funds that are invested must be thoroughly sourced at the time of filing. So I'll kind of weave in the scenario again for the partial investment that I mentioned. We're either tracing the full $800,000 for an investor, and they're making that full investment right before we file, or we are tracing the full investment, the full 800, and they're doing a partial investment. In either scenario, we have to fully explain the source of the funds that are being invested, regardless if there is a full investment or a partial investment, like $400,000, for example. The common sources that we see are income savings, so direct deposits accumulated in a bank account, asset sale proceeds, that can be stocks, cars, properties. We also see inheritance of either assets or savings as well after a family member has passed away. We also see loans, whether those are issued directly by a bank or an individual. And then we also see gifts. We recommend that gifts be issued by family members because gifts from non-family might receive more scrutiny from USCIS. The difference between a loan and a gift is that the latter, the gift won't require repayment. The loans, whether it's issued by a bank or you're receiving it from a friend or family member, those require good faith loan agreements with normal market terms and a repayment schedule for the investor to follow over time. The program requires 5 years of tax returns, but if the transactions that we're following and tracing for the investor exceed 5 years, then we're essentially wanting to match that same time period. The types of documents we would include in addition to those tax returns are bank statements, sale or loan agreements, gift affidavits if those are relevant as well. For loans issued by individuals or gifts that are issued by individuals, we are fully sourcing those funds as well. So we're treating a lender or a gifter as if they were the investor, and they would require providing us those same types of documents as well. If the loan is issued by a bank or financial institution, we're focused on the loan agreement. We're not asking where the bank got their funds. If there's any collateral backing any type of loan, those are assets that we also have to explain to immigration. So let's say an investor is taking a HELOC, for example, and the HELOC's being issued by a bank. The question will be, well, how did the investor purchase or obtain the property that they're now using for a HELOC? So again, purchase agreement, HELOC agreement, if those are relevant. Essentially, the process is, tracing the funds from inception of, whether you earned it or obtained it from somewhere else, and following that trail all the way up until it's been invested into the EB-5 project. Okay, CSPA changes. This is something that I think is really important to go over. Let's say there's a child who is maybe 16 or 17 or 18, and the family wants to ensure that they are a part of the EB-5 application. The thing to keep in mind is that a child can be included up under age 21 as long as they're unmarried as well. So it's important to remember that there's potentially a calculation that needs to be done at the time of the 526E approval, which is when immigration essentially approves the source of funds for the investment. It's not guaranteed that the age be locked in or protected up until that time. So the way that the calculation works is that at the time of filing the 526E, that's when your child's age would freeze when we submit that concurrent filing. When the 526E and the source of funds are approved, that's when the age starts again. That point in time, we have to assess the visa bulletin. If it's current, then that's great, and then we would have to move on to green card processing. There's essentially not a gap in the age because it's been frozen up until that point of time, and then you're immediately moving on to green card adjudication. If there is a backlog at the time of that approval, the question will be, what is the priority date for my filing? What does the visa bulletin say in terms of dates that they're adjudicating, and how much time has passed for the child's age, and that's how the calculation is done. So there are factors there that cannot be predicted when we file a 526E, but that's essentially the process that we would follow to figure out if a child would benefit through a filing after time has passed and after that approval. Okay, so here are just some general processing times that we're seeing for the EB-5 filings. The pre-RIA processing times are lengthier than those for the set-aside categories that we just talked about. So those are about 4 to 7 years, whereas 526E approvals for the set-aside categories range anywhere from 6 to 24 months. So tying it back to the visa bulletin, there are things that we cannot predict, and the timeliness of these approvals are one of those things as well. So it's not guaranteed that these processing times stay this fast. The thing to keep in mind is that, again, the visa bulletin is current right now. It's updated on a month-to-month basis, and as long as it's current, you have quicker access to the employment authorization documents and the travel documents that you would concurrent file along with the 526E. Okay, here's one of the topics that I think are trending for source of funds right now. Regional center, developer-related loans. This is coming up when there's an entity that's closely related to either the regional center and the developer, and those are issuing loans to investors for their EB-5 investment. There aren't any laws that outlaw that type of source of funds as long as it's in good faith. That's something that we would be looking for, but there are trends related to issuance of RFEs and notices of intent to deny when that type of loan is being used. So the risk is to the investor, not necessarily the regional center or the developer, because the investor is filing their 526E, which is telling the story of the source of funds. So our recommendation there is to try to avoid those types of loans, especially with the trends that we're seeing in RFEs and denials. Self-directed IRAs are another, popular topic for source of funds right now. Essentially, oh, I'm sorry. Did someone say something? No, okay. So the self-directed IRAs are 401ks being rolled over into a self-directed IRA. Essentially, you would want to check in with a plan administrator for your 401k to see if that's an option for you. What we would do in terms of source of funds is, fully trace that 401k account to confirm contributions from both the investor and their employer. And then once that's been rolled over into the self-directed IRA, we would provide statements for that account as well. But again, you want to check with your administrator to see if that's an option for you. You also want to check with the project to make sure that they have their own IRA where they could receive those funds directly. So you're essentially sending funds from your self-directed to the project's account with the same entity or platform for the self-directed IRA. A key point here is that the person who is using the self-directed IRA needs to be the main applicant in the EB-5 application. So if an investor has, self-directed funds that are coming from a 401k account, they need to be the primary applicant. And unfortunately, a spouse's self-directed account would not be able to qualify for a source of funds. And that's really a securities point. There's subscription documents that are related to that. And essentially, you need to have the same person on the EB-5 application be listed on that self-directed account as well. That doesn't apply to other sources, salary, for example, or maybe, sale of stock that was issued by an employer. If a spouse has those types of funds and they qualify in terms of, being able to document those things, a spouse could use that towards their EB-5 investment. Okay, a little bit about our consultation and engagement process. What we do is we send every potential investor a questionnaire to fill out before we schedule them for a phone call in our office. And that's really just to get some background information to work off of during our free consultation. That's essentially a phone call or a Teams meeting for 30 minutes where we go over this process with an investor. We answer questions that they might have about, their application or their source of funds, and then we go through each of the steps of the filing. So, discussing concurrent filing potentially, timelines, and then ultimately the source of funds, which is very important part of EB-5. Okay, so here are my contact details to get information or maybe set up a consultation with our office. My email is here. Our office phone number is there as well. You could always check out our website too if you wanted to, read comments from prior clients or maybe even read articles that we've written about the EB-5 program, source of funds. We have lots of articles on the topics. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, I know we're going to go over some project details, but I'm happy to answer questions as they come as well.
So we do have some questions. I think that throughout you might have answered them partially, but we have one that says source of funds can be Alto IRA and partially from spouse savings accounts.
Yes. So Alto IRA, that's a popular platform for the self-directed IRAs that we're seeing. Those can be used if that person is also the primary applicant. So let's say I have a self-directed account. It was funded with a 401k. I need to be the primary applicant for the EB-5 application. A spouse from savings account is fine too. If we're looking for payroll that's been accumulated over time, we're essentially looking for direct deposits in the bank account. And then in light of any spending or transfers, how much has been saved from that over time.
Okay. And this is actually a big question. I get this a lot when I speak to investors. So we have a gentleman asking, will we be able to avail EAD if the date is retrogressed?
So if the date's retrogressed, you won't be able to file for it. When you do a concurrent filing, it's because the visa bulletin has those 3 categories as current. There's no backlog. So essentially, we need to see that letter C on the visa bulletin to file that application. Once you receive those, EAD cards, travel documents, let's say there is retrogression, those are still valid. You have them. The key question is going to be, can I even file for it in the first place? And that's when we look at the visa bulletin.
If we move the funds from my spouse's...
So Jacqueline, to clarify back, I think the question could also be can they still get it if they filed it while the visa bulletin was current? During the processing, the date's retrogressed.
Yeah, so it depends on the processing times. Right now, we're looking at 4 to 6 months when they're receiving those documents. So, depending on when that application might have been picked up by an officer, that's going to determine, whether they receive that.
Okay. And then with someone saying if they were to move funds from their spouse's account into their account, would that be okay? And I think they mean savings and bank accounts. I don't think they mean IRA accounts.
Yes. So, movement of funds from bank accounts, we're tracing those transfers, those outward transfers, those incoming deposits. If they're joint accounts or, single accounts, those are things that we would just request bank statements for.
Okay, great. And then I just, I've been talking to a lot of investors, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about what timelines you're seeing for HUAs, currently, like with your current clientele? A lot of people want to know, like, is there really a very big difference in time right now between a rural project or an HUA project currently?
Yes. So we are seeing about a 12 to 24 month timeline for high unemployment investments. When it comes to getting an approval, the important thing to remember is that there's a lot of moving parts there that could influence an approval. One of those is, project type, but also source of funds. That's a lot of the heavy lifting for the cases that we're filing. So, if there's no, additional questions on the file, there's no RFEs being issued, things like that, that's something that could be, go straight to an approval. Every case is different, every officer is different too. So it really is a case by case basis.
If EB-5 funds are returned after only 2 years of investment, this is a question I have. Is there a risk towards an investor's green card process?
So the program requires that the funds be invested for a minimum of 2 years. It's rare that we see a project with that same type of hold period. It's usually longer than the 2 years, but essentially the offering documents that the investor signs would govern that hold period potentially beyond 2 years. So, I mean, if there is a hold for 2 years and, that satisfies the program, then that's just fine. But that's just really not what we're seeing for projects.
So someone is asking if dates retrogress during processing. So meaning they have, put in their application, but it hasn't been kind of acknowledged yet. And within that time, the retrogression occurred. Is there an option for the investor to take back funds or withdraw an application?
I think that's out of a project question.
Yes, totally. Yeah, that first question, you guys can tackle that. But in terms of withdrawal of the application, I mean, if you wanted to withdraw EB-5, you could certainly do that. But generally, the funds are subject to, you and the developer, you and the project, those deal documents that you signed there.
So I'll answer back. No. So once your funds are invested, they are invested for the duration of the offering. This cannot return because you also need to understand once the funds deployed to the project, there is no way we can return the money until there is an exit event. So do your due diligence, make sure you understand everything before you fund. It's very important to take an action when you're fully ready.
Okay. Another question. Is it possible to keep H1 status while filing for EB-5? Is there any time in processing when one has to surrender their H1 visa and move on to the green card EAD?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. Yes, it is possible to keep your H1 status, and you don't necessarily have to surrender your H1B status during that processing time. So, and that's what our general recommendation is that you continue to maintain your H1B status while EB-5 is pending. Let's say you do get an EAD, you do get the AP through the EB-5 filing. You don't have to use those documents. Their approval, their issuance is not what's going to take you out of H-1B status. It's the presentation, the use of that AP at the airport. It's the use of that EAD. Hey, here's my new, employment card. Employer, please use this instead of my H-1B. Those are things that take you out of H-1B status. You want to maintain H-1B. Travel on your H-1B, continue to maintain that with your employer, keep up with your renewals, extensions, things like that.
Okay, next question. So basically now an EAD is issued for 18 months. Is the EB-5 category allowed for auto extension to avoid a lapse in employment? If not auto-extended, then I doubt EAD is renewed in 6 months, even if we file on time. Is that correct?
Right, yes. So without the automatic extensions and then the smaller validity period, you have to keep an eye on that EAD expiration a little bit more closely. So, making sure that you have that date in your calendar, making sure that you're filing as soon as you can for that renewal. Going from a 5-year EAD to an 18-month EAD is a drastic difference, but there's more of a risk there for gap in employment, so it's really important to keep an eye on those dates.
And this is something I actually talk to investors a lot. So, is there any risk if an investor is pursuing EB-1 and EB-5 filing simultaneously?
Not necessarily. Ultimately, you can only hold one green card. So, let's say you have both types of applications, submitted. You're going to have to decide which one needs to be withdrawn when the green card comes, because you can only have one of those filings, one of those green cards under EB at a time. So, maybe figuring out strategically what's the best form to submit, what's the best application to submit for myself. Do I have the qualifications for EB-1 or EB-5? What's a better fit? Deciding that and planning for that is really important.
And then I see I'm going out of queue, but I think this just makes more sense.
Okay.
So people are asking that during every 18-month renewal, are they re-scrutinized? Or what is that process like, the renewal process? Is it relatively easy, or is there a lot that kind of goes into it?
My understanding is that the process is the same. It's just the window of getting that done is a lot smaller now.
Mm-hmm. So it's like it's basically the same paperwork that would go for the renewal, and it's not any like new.
Right.
Interviewing or questioning, right? It's the same paperwork that's just going to avoid a lapse.
Right.
Someone is asking this. I'm not quite sure what it means. With H1 status, but visa expired, can we still travel without visa stamping using AP?
So if you travel with AP, that takes you out of H1 anyways. So, let's say you decide not to go get a visa stamp, or, you're having trouble getting an appointment for a visa stamp, you have that AP in your back pocket. And that's kind of, the idea of, the security in your back pocket. You might not plan initially to use the EAD for employment or the AP, but let's say, H1 doesn't work out, or there's, unexpected job loss, for example, you have that AP to travel on, you have that EAD to travel on. Those are things to keep in mind.
What is the queue for Indian citizens to get their EAD?
So it's the general 4 to 6 months that I referenced earlier. There's no difference in approval timelines based on home country. It's really just tied to the fact that you've submitted a green card application, and that's what those EAD and AP applications are tied to.
If I take a HELOC on my primary home to speed my EB-5 application and close this after HELOC, after I sell my rental property, maybe USCIS will look into my application and my HELOC will be closed. Will that cause an RFE?
So I'm not sure I totally follow here, but if
I think basically what he's saying is he has a rental property on the market, but to speed up his funding, he takes a HELOC on his primary home. And then during the process of the processing, he sells his rental, pays off the HELOC. And then he's saying that would the USCIS, when they look into the application, the HELOC might be closed.
Yeah. So anything we submit in the filing is open to questioning. So with the HELOC, the primary focus is the initial purchase of the property, but we are including that HELOC agreement. We're saying, these funds were dispersed, invested on this date, et cetera, et cetera. It's possible that, that could be asked about later, whether it's, at a point of an RFE before 526E approval or later down the road when we're filing to remove conditions on the 2-year conditional green card. Again, it's remembering that anything that we include could be open for questioning. So let's say that USCIS does come back and say, hey, we saw a note in this, agreement. It mentions that you were going to pay this HELOC off by this date. We're 2 years beyond that now. How did you pay it off? We're going to want to show not only how you purchased that rental property, but when did you sell it and how did you pay off that HELOC? So it's kind of a domino effect with things. Anything that you supply or explain could be questioned further.
Someone is asking, if I get rejected for EB-1, am I still able to apply for EB-5?
Yes. Generally, yes, those are two separate, categories with different requirements. As long as you qualify for EB-5, based on your background and in your qualifications for the program itself, then yes.
Okay. It says, when can we expect GC green card conditions to be removed? Do we have an option to extend EAD if conditions are not removed? How many times can we extend, or how long can we extend?
So I would have to double check on how many extensions or how long that can be for in terms of, the newer, shorter validity period. But for green card timelines and removal, those are taking quite a bit of time right now. Essentially, once you receive your 2-year conditional green card, you're holding that for at least a year and 9 months before you file to remove conditions. And that form in particular is just taking a really long time to get adjudicated. I think the last time I looked was either 45 or 55 months for 80% of those cases. What they're doing right now is they're automatically extending your conditional green card when you file to remove the conditions on it. And that's because they know that form is taking so long to get adjudicated. It's essentially the same, they're the same documents, but their validity period is different. The conditional is 2, whereas the permanent is 10 years, but, can work, can travel, green card holder.
So actually, I don't understand the question because I don't understand the reference of EAD in that. Because once you get a conditional green card, you get it. You don't need a EAD anymore.
Yes, that's correct. So once your conditional green card is issued, your former status, your EAD, your H-1B, your F-1, whatever the case might be, that's irrelevant. That's very different in terms of I'm on H-1B, here's my EAD card. The switch out of H-1B is not automatic there. It is automatic for the green card when that's issued. But in terms of just the EAD in general and how that validity period is, I can always double check on that, what the extensions are looking like and if it can be.
So I have this question. I'm a little confused about the ending, but I think okay, so I'm just going to read it. After we move to an EAD, and if unfortunately something goes wrong with their EB-5 processing, can they go back to their H-1B without any issues? Without the 100K condition that I guess has been a recent, thing with the USCIS for H-1B?
Potentially. It depends on, whether you still have time on H-1B. Maybe you can, recapture some time. Maybe you found a new employer who's willing to, do an H-1B for you. But they are correct. When something goes wrong with the EB-5 or the green card application, those EAD and AP documents are invalid. So, finding an alternate status would be the next step.
If the I-526 is denied or rejected, will the funds be refunded by the project? And we can talk about that. Basically, that's project to project, right? That's not, that's kind of what you sign when you sign to a project. You should check out the PPM. And basically, with our project, yes, we do guarantee a refund, if you are, denied or rejected by the USAS for your I-526, as long as it's not because of any fraudulence on your part, in your application. So that is a guarantee that we offer for our project particularly. And then I just see someone has their hand up. You were talking about the 45 to 55 months, and they just want a clarification that what does that mean? What was that pertaining to?
Yep, that was for the processing times for the I-829, which is the removal of conditions application to obtain that permanent green card. So if you Google like a particular form and then processing times, there's kind of a drop down option on the website, and they can give you estimated timelines for processing, usually for 80% of cases.
Yeah. But I think that's irrelevant, because once you have a conditional green card and they keep on auto renewing, they're essentially on a green card.
Yep, same benefits there, work, employment. It's just the validity period, and they know that, which is the reason for that automatic extension.
And I think that, I think we've gotten through most of the questions. I guess we can, talk a little bit about, I just really want to very much talk about the EB-5 program and why right now is so important. Timing wise, it's because, in September of this year, the current rendition of this program is lapsing. Right. And we talked to so many people and they're like, oh, I want to invest within the next 1 to 2 months, but I don't have an attorney yet. And I don't know, but I'm looking at projects. And basically what I want to tell everyone right now, and please feel free to chime in, because I know you have a lot of thoughts about this as well. But timing right now, it is essential at this point. If you know for a fact that EB-5 is your path, for you and your family to stay in the country, and that's your priority, right now is the absolute time to retain an attorney. And I know a lot of people are more focused on project, and that's super important too. Obviously, it goes hand in hand as your attorney and the project that you select. But unless you have an attorney who is like really like working with you, you've retained them, you've begun your source of fund work, you can look at every project that's available, but it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you have to retain an attorney to do EB-5. You have to have an attorney do your source of fund work. And that is extremely, that's the crux of your entire application, to the USCIS, because at the end of the day, as Jacqueline also talked about, these investments are looked at by the government as securities. Right. And the oversight and the way that they're going to look, not one layer, the way they're going to look at the funds, it's not as straightforward as a lot of people think. I hear a lot of times, oh, my source of funds is super straightforward. Oh, my money is here. It's in my IRA. It's in that. When they're looking at 5 years of your tax returns, your bank accounts, there are always little things that come up. And Jacqueline, like, where are you guys seeing right now and I'll say on the straightforward source of funds, where people say, well, all of my funds are here in the United States. I'm not bringing anything over for out of seas. What are you seeing right now? And on average, of course, it's case by case basis, but on average, what are you seeing as a turnaround for when, if people understand how much paperwork they also have to provide to you, if you can talk to us a little bit about that, what they should be accumulating, maybe what they can put together to even before they talk to you.
Yes. So our general case turnaround time frame is 30 to 60 days. And we always mention in our consultations with potential clients, is that timeline is very dependent on source of funds. And even though source of funds is also, the most important part of the filing, within our office, you're kind of juggling two aspects of the filing: source of funds, and then you're also working on the application forms themselves. That by 260, the 485, the EAD, the AP, those ask for a lot of information. And those take time to put together, especially source of funds. So, with our consultations, that's really the first conversation about source of funds. Sometimes there's, conversation back and forth in emails, making sure we're on the same page. But it takes time to get there and fully trace someone's funds. Every case is different, like you mentioned. So, making sure that you speak to someone, an attorney, who's, in the EB-5 space, whether that's us or someone else, giving them that fair amount of time to put your case together. It's a lot of money and it's, a very important process. So giving it that fair, amount of time is really important.
Yeah.
And then,
So I'll also add to it, means I want to be a little bit blunt on this thing. I don't like sugar-coated words. If at this moment you don't have an attorney or you don't plan to have an attorney next 1 or 2 weeks, there is very less likely that you will get into the current train. Like the train might leave because, as you all know, the current grandfathering is expiring by September, and the rush is just keep on going. Every day we hear, Rima and I talk to a lot of people who want to get it done. And the line just keeps on getting bigger and bigger, and that's going to make attorneys more and more busy. And also your source of fund, people, right? I mean, people think that they have everything here, they can get it done faster. That's not true. Like, you never know what transaction could be troublesome, or USCIS might question something. So attorneys has to do a very thorough job in explaining each and everything, and that takes time. So if you really want your green card to EB-5, you need to act on it right away. We can keep on talking about the project, and you can also keep on researching on a project, but the most important person in this whole thing is the attorney. You need to return an attorney right away and start your SOF and all the other application work as soon as possible.
I see a question about grandfathering. So currently, yes, it's not likely that there's grandfathering. There absolutely is grandfathering. So if you have your applications and everything in before September of this year, the end of September of this year, you will be in the current rendition of the law of EB-5. We don't know. None of us can predict what's going to happen. So if you kind of Google, you can go through many rabbit holes of many types of predictions, but none of us really know. What we do know is what we have currently. And, as someone who's been in EB-5 for over a decade now, I can absolutely, with my full chest say that this is the safest time for EB-5 investors that we've ever really seen in the program, with the passing of the RIA in 2022. And, if you know for a fact that, yes, I need to do EB-5, this is something that I need to do, this is the time to get in before whatever may happen in September, because you will be guaranteed to be in the actual program as it is now, which in my opinion is absolutely just the most protections that we've ever seen for investors in EB-5. And so again, as Buplesh said, if you know that this is something that you want to do, attorneys are getting very busy. Their rosters are filling up, and you seriously, I absolutely recommend you to get in touch with Jacqueline. Get in touch with 1 or 2, 3 attorneys, and find who you feel most comfortable with. And please do, if you know that you want to do EB-5, you need to take that first step to retain and start your source of fund work. I have another question here. It's for Buplesh and Jacqueline both. In general, are there any questions or follow-ups during that 45 to 55 month period after the conditional green card is given? And then Buplesh, from the developer's standpoint, are developers typically available to respond to inquiries throughout the entire process as they're holding the funds? This person is saying, I'm trying to understand how this usually works, since it's a longer duration, and whether projects tend to receive less attention if it takes up to 55 months for conditions to be removed. Could you please shed some light on the general process?
Yep. So for the removal of conditions, that's something that's at that time you're primarily focused on the project. So, were jobs created, business plans satisfied, things like that. Your source of funds have already been approved. But again, like I mentioned, those topics could come up again. So, I think you guys can maybe share about, what that support looks like from the developer side, but that's, what it looks like for us.
So, we so all I can say is yes, we will be there until you get your final green card. Okay, that's our commitment to you, that we will not leave you in the middle, regardless of what the condition of the project is. The project, as it in current situation, will finish by Q3 of 2027, but that does not mean that our obligation towards you ends over there. And in Q1 of 2029, we plan to pay you back. But until you get your final green card, we will keep on working with you. And this is also a commitment not from the developer, but also from the regional center, who is looking over the entire program, from who is sponsoring our project. So that is their commitment as well. Like, unless you get your final green card, we'll keep on working with you. Our role will be probably not much, because once we provide you the certificate of job creation, it's essentially just responding to any inquiries from USCIS which may come up. And we don't see that much option, because the USCIS cares for whether jobs were created as projected. If those were created, then the condition was satisfied. Most of the time, it's just a processing time and delays on their end, rather than any specific concerns or questions.
And then, kind of to piggyback on the job creation, I think we have a nice question. Do we need to show job creation till conditions are removed, or only for the 2 years? Which I think is a good question. What people get confused about. So, do they have to show that those jobs were created for the 4 or 5 years, or is it for the initial 2 year, whatever it might be?
Yep. So, those are kind of, like you alluded to, two different things. The period of hold, as per the law, at minimum is 2 years. So holding those funds, having them at risk for 2 years. Job creation and the removal of conditions, those are things that come later down the pipeline. So making sure that your investment can be allocated towards direct, indirect, induced jobs. That's what they're looking for when you're filing to remove the conditions. So that's, potentially, 4 to 5, 6 years potentially. You're holding that green card for at least a year and 9 months when it's issued. But again, getting to that point, that's, another year and a half potentially. So kind of tying up those, timelines together, for each of those steps it's a lot of moving parts, but that's essentially what it looks like.
And then this is a project-related question. Do we get returns on the investment for the time it is with the project? Baplesh, if you want to.
Sure, you do get a return, because as it's investment, an investment has to make money. There has to be certain capital returns, and the return on the capital, yes, there is. We offer 1%. So set up a one-on-one call with us, and we can talk more in more detail about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as our time kind of is wrapping, one more for you, Baplesh. Does this project help with finding unsecured loan providers?
No,
we do not.
We don't provide loans, and we highly discourage using developer provided loans, because recently we have seen tons of rejections. And I personally don't endorse that thing, not at all.
Yeah. And then just as we're wrapping, I just want to say, for anybody who wants to learn more about our project, please reach out. I actually have I'll be sending a follow-up email. We'd love to set up a one-on-one. And of course, Jacqueline is available. You had her contact information. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for your time tonight. We're so grateful. We answered so many wonderful questions. And again, at the end of all of this, I just want to wish everybody like the best in your journey. These are big decisions that are being made for your future, for your family, and whoever you go with, we wish you absolutely the best. And again, thank you so much. And we'd love to talk to you again to go through our specific project details. Please do reach out. Love to schedule a one-on-one Zoom. We can go through our deck, and talk to you with questions. We notice that a lot of times people don't want to ask specific questions on a public webinar. And so myself, Baplesh, we're absolutely available to you to talk details. If you have any more questions, please do reach out. And with that, I think we'll say good night, and then thank you again, Baplesh, if you want to say anything.
Just say thank you and good luck. And the only thing is, if you are looking into EB-5, want to get a green card, get on the train as soon as possible before it leaves.
Yeah, very, very true.
All right, thanks, Jackie. Thanks for taking the call today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye bye.